Good evening, everybody. This is Maheshwar Charitable Trust Latur, India, organizing daily international webinar series. In this series, the speakers from India and abroad are invited to deliver their speeches on different topics every day. Today, we welcome our keynote speaker, Margarita Estrada, who is master in entrepreneurship, and she is from Bogota, Colombia. We welcome you, ma'am. And her topic is entrepreneurship in today's world. She is master in entrepreneurship and currently leading innovation and entrepreneurship initiatives in higher education. She is experienced in education strategy, consulting, and ICT-based learning design. She is interested in roles in edutech, L&D, and innovation entrepreneurship ecosystems. We welcome you, ma'am, from my organization and all the participants, those who are joined here. I welcome you and all the participants. We request you, you can start your speech now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm very happy to be here. It's the morning for me, so good evening to all of you. So before we really get started, let me say this first. I know we are all on screens right now. Some of you might be joining from different cities, maybe even different time zones. So I genuinely appreciate you taking the time to be here with me today. Now, just to give you a bit of context, my name is Margarita Estrada. I'm Colombian, and my work focuses on entrepreneurship and how people turn ideas into real sustainable projects. I spend a lot of my time working with entrepreneurs, students, organizations, and what I've noticed over the years is that there's often a big gap between how entrepreneurship is talked about and how it actually works in real life. Okay, so what I want to share with you today comes from observation and practice, not from hype or theory. And with that in mind, let me start with a simple question. At some point in your life, maybe recently, maybe a long time ago, have you ever thought about building something of your own? Yes, you can type on the chat box if you want. Not necessarily a huge company, not something that ends up in the news. Can you hear me? Yes, I'm here. Yes. Okay. So you can type on the chat box if you have thought of building something of your own. Okay, so we can make this more dynamic. Okay, but if you haven't, that's fine. So maybe you have thought about starting your own business, starting your own company, something meaningful, something independent. We all dream about being independent, right? We all dream about becoming our own bosses. Okay, we all dream about having free time, right? Because we tend to associate entrepreneurship with freedom, entrepreneurship with independence. So if you've ever had that thought, even quietly, then you're already closer to entrepreneurship than you might realize. Okay, so at some stage in our life, we have thought about starting our own business, right? Because we always have these great ideas. So we say, hey, if there was this and that, maybe maybe that could work. Now, even if you haven't thought about starting your own business, okay, that's fine, because this conversation is for both. It's for those who have thought about it and for those who haven't bothered thinking about it yet. So, when people hear the word entrepreneurship today, a lot of images immediately come to mind, right? We think about social media posts, okay? We think about the hustle culture. We think about those overnight success stories, right? Oh, this person became rich overnight, or this person started doing this and that, and look at him now, or look at her now, right? We hear about people talking about how they made it very quickly, how they became rich, or how they became successful very quickly. But that's not what I really want to talk about today. Instead, what I want to talk about is what entrepreneurship actually looks like in the real world, okay? I would like to focus on that version of entrepreneurship that moves at a slower, more realistic pace, right? Because real progress usually takes time, okay? Real progress usually takes it doesn't take weeks, it doesn't take months, it takes years of small, consistent effort. So, and along the way, it's uncertain, okay, and it's more demanding than most people expect. Now, but at the same time, okay, when we think about this type of entrepreneurship that takes time, consistency, and effort, is the type of entrepreneurship that it's more realistic, okay, and far more sustainable. Because entrepreneurship today isn't just about starting companies, it's about how people think, how they solve problems, and how they create value. Create value. I hope that sinks in, because that's super important, okay? To solve problems, think about solving problems and create value in a world that keeps changing. So rather than trying to motivate you for the next 30 minutes or 40 minutes that we are going to be here together, my goal today is to bring some clarity to help entrepreneurship feel more understandable and realistic. Okay. And with that, let's clear up a very common misunderstanding. Okay. Where entrepreneurship really starts. So most people believe entrepreneurship starts with an idea, right? So we associate entrepreneurship with good ideas. You hear it all the time. I just need a good idea. If I had the right idea, I will start. I'm waiting for inspiration, right? But here's the thing, ideas are everywhere. Right? Ideas are actually cheap. And I'm sorry to say it so bluntly, but ideas are everywhere. Execution is what's rare. Okay. So let me slow this down for a moment. Entrepreneurship doesn't really begin with ideas. Okay. It begins with problems. Okay. Let me explain what I mean. Every business that survives does so because it solves a problem better than the alternatives. Not perfectly, just better, or slightly better. Okay. Think about Apple for a moment. And I know that whenever we think about entrepreneurship, there are these big companies, these big entrepreneurs, these big names that come to mind. But Apple is an excellent example. Apple didn't invent the phone. They didn't invent the computer. They didn't invent music players. In fact, all of those products already existed. People were already using them, right? and they were already buying them. People were already buying computers, people were already buying cell phones. What Apple did instead was take a step back, okay, and really observe how people were using those products, okay? And they asked very simple questions like, why is this so frustrating to use? Why for some people using technology is so frustrating, right? Why does it feel harder than it should? Why do people have to adapt to the technology instead of the technology adapting to people? So rather than trying to create something completely new, they focused on removing friction, right? They simplify things, they improve the experience, they made everyday actions feel more intuitive, right? If you're familiar with the Apple story. So, and that's an important point because it shows us that entrepreneurship isn't always about invention, okay? And that's super important that we keep in mind. Isn't always about invention. Very often it's about improvement, okay? So it's about noticing where people struggle, okay, and asking how things could work better. Now, so because of that, real entrepreneurs usually don't ask what idea should I build. Okay, I need to think about great ideas. No, they ask questions like, what are people constantly complaining about? Okay, in our everyday work, right, in our everyday hustle, we hear complaints all the time. Okay, people tell us their problems, we have our own problems, right? So entrepreneurs focus on what feels inefficient or outdated, what problems keep coming back again and again. So if you like, let's make this a bit more interactive for a moment. So I want you to think about one problem that you are experiencing or something people around you often struggle with, right? So depending on your industry, depending on your field of work, okay, people have specific problems. So if you want, you can type it on the chat box. What are those problems that people are facing, okay, in your industry? What are the complaints that you hear people talking all the time? Okay, that gives us some insights of what's going on. Now, it could be something that frustrates you, something that feels inefficient, something that is confusing, something that is complicated, right? We have plenty of those, right? So you can type one word or just a short phrase if you wish, or if not, that's okay too. Now, okay, Dr. Shwanan, hello.
Yes. Good evening, Madam over here. There is a good evening, and I think for you it is good afternoon over there.
Yeah, it's good morning for me.
Good morning to you. Oh, yeah, thank you. So I think people are, when they are in a business or any kind of work job, very important, the consistency is not there, or the people always think about, they should grow up and the trend should go up. But many of the times it happens that maybe because of the market or maybe because of the share market, the things comes down, and then the growth which was going on, there are some breaks for that growth. So I hear this kind of stories with my various business friends. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate your contribution. Yeah, that's right. So that's exactly what entrepreneurs notice, right? They notice problems, okay, and you shouldn't worry so much about thinking about great ideas. thinking about inventions. You should worry about observing problems, and out of problems, because of those problems, is that we can come up with these great ideas. Now, and why today is different, okay? And this is where today's world really matters, because today problems are visible, right? People complain online, they leave reviews, they post videos explaining exactly why something doesn't work. So in many ways, entrepreneurship today isn't really about creativity, it's about attention, right? The people who succeed are often the ones who notice what others ignore. Now, having said that, entrepreneurship today looks very different from what it did 15 or 20 years ago. Not better, okay, not worse, just different. So in the past, starting a business usually meant large amounts of capital, right? You needed to have a lot of money. You needed to have a lot of money to invest. It meant physical infrastructure. It meant connections. It meant having to have permissions from the right people, right? Today, those barriers are much lower. In many cases, you just need a laptop, an internet connection, a clear audience, and of course, the willingness to learn as you go. And now you can test ideas a lot quicker than before. You can start small, you can experiment without risking everything at once, okay? However, and this part is very important, and I want you to think about that, just because it's easier to start doesn't mean it's easier to succeed. In fact, it's often harder, because when everyone can start, standing out becomes more difficult. Okay, your competition isn't local anymore. Your competition is now global. So what actually matters now, okay, consistency, okay, quality, okay, and trust. Let me repeat that: consistency, quality, and trust, okay? And I want us to talk about failure, because failure feels different now. And when we think about failure, okay, this is where many people hesitate. Entrepreneurship has always involved risk. That hasn't changed. It's still very risky, right? To start a business is very risky. It's risky business, right? But what has changed? The cost of failure, okay? In the past, failure meant losing everything, right? Losing money or wasting your money, wasting time, okay? Your reputation, okay? Today, failure usually means learning something, okay? For example, if a product doesn't sell, that's feedback. It's telling you something important. Maybe the price is wrong, maybe the timing is off, or maybe the problem isn't painful enough yet. Now, a message that doesn't resonate with your audience, okay? That's a very common way. That's a very common way to fail. That's actually information that you get from your audience, from your client, okay? It shows that your language, your framing, or your assumptions don't quite match how people see the problem. Now, for example, a launch that doesn't work, that's insight, okay? You're learning from it. It reveals gap you couldn't see before about your audience, about your channels, or your approach. So none of these outcomes are wasted. They are signals, okay? And if you're paying attention, each one helps you adjust, refine, and move forward with more clarity. Because when we start a business, we are always adjusting. We are always refining, right? We are growing, okay? And as we adjust, as we refine, we move forward with more clarity. So, in other words, failure today isn't an ending as it used to be 15 or 20 years ago. It's part of the process. Okay. So, modern entrepreneurs don't avoid failure, they designed around it. So, you need to fail small, you need to fail early, and then adjust. Okay, that's super important. Fail small, maybe with a small prototype, with your service, with a product that doesn't cost you much money. And you need to fail soon, like early, right? And you need to adjust as you go, and then do it over and over again. Now, just a quick question and just answer honestly. Type one word in the chat that describes how failure usually feels to you. Okay. How
Challenge.
failure usually feels to you.
Challenge.
Challenging. Okay. Okay, it's challenging. Yeah, it's challenging. We think about becoming vulnerable, right? Because this needs to work out. Otherwise, I'm going to be in trouble. I'm not going to have enough money. Mismanagement. Yes, of course. Okay. So notice how emotional those words are, right? Mismanagement, challenges, not having enough resources. And that's exactly why reframing failure is so important today. Okay. Right? We cannot perceive it as we usually perceive it, like the end, like I'm done, this is it for me. No, it's if we think about failure as a learning stage, learning phase, it's easier for us to think about starting our own business. It's easier for us to think about becoming entrepreneurs. So the real risk actually isn't failure. And I want you, if there is one thing I want you to get out of this conference, out of my conference today, is that the real risk isn't failure. The real risk is waiting forever. Okay. The real risk is waiting to have everything perfect in order to start. Okay. Sometimes we think, oh, everything needs to, I need to plan everything. Everything needs to be perfect before I launch this product, before I launch this idea, this service. Okay. And that's a disguise. Okay. We hide behind that. Okay. And that's the real risk. Okay. To wait for everything to be perfect. Of course, there is some planning beforehand. There is some, you need to study your clients. You need to study the context. And there are many things that we need to do before starting our own business. But staying in that planning phase for too long, that's the real risk. Not failing, it's not the real risk. Now, there is one more idea I want to pause for a moment because it comes up a lot when people talk about entrepreneurship, and that idea is freedom. Okay, we often hear that entrepreneurship is about freedom, right? I want to start my own business because I want to be free, right? Freedom of time, freedom of choice, freedom from bosses, right? We want to become our own bosses. We want freedom from rigid structures. And eventually that can be true, but not at the beginning. At the start, entrepreneurship usually means more responsibility, not less. And be careful with that. Entrepreneurship means more responsibility. okay? More decisions, more uncertainty, more accountability for outcomes, okay? Early on, okay? That's what we need to face early on. You don't actually have fewer constraints, you have more, okay? More constraints. On our 9 to 5 job, okay, we get up, we go to work, okay, we do what we have to do, we come back home, okay? It's a routine that we have, okay? But when we start our own business, things change. We have a lot more constraints, okay? You're responsible for direction. You're responsible for progress, for adjusting when things don't work, okay? You need to adjust. So entrepreneurship isn't really about escaping work. Okay, if you want to work less, don't start your own business, okay? Because it demands to work even harder, okay? But the rewards can be greater, right? So it's about choosing what kind of responsibility you're willing to take on. And over time, if you create real value for your clients, for your audience, that's when flexibility and freedom start to appear, right? Over time, but not at the beginning. So it's the result, okay? It's the result. And this is exactly why the skills you build matter so much, because when freedom isn't guaranteed, skills are what keep you moving forward. So at this point, you might be asking yourselves, okay, Margarita, what should I actually focus on learning? What should I learn? Okay. If I want to start my own business, should I study entrepreneurship? No. Okay. And that's a very practical question, because today skills matter more than titles. Okay. And I say that because titles can change, roles change, entire industries change now with the AI, with artificial intelligence, right? The field, our work is changing a lot, but skills stay with you. So, for example, learning how to learn matters, because things don't slow down anymore. There are new tools showing up, new ways of working, and if you can adapt, you don't feel lost every time something changes. So communication, learning how to communicate matters a lot, because if you cannot explain what you're doing and why it matters, people won't really connect with you. People won't really connect with your product. People won't really connect with your service. Okay, so, or people won't care. So learning how to communicate is super important. Okay, understanding emotional resilience, right? Emotional resilience matters, because honestly, this process comes with uncertainty. There will be moments of doubt, of course, moments where things don't work, where you will face rejection, and you still have to keep going. And you need to think about systems thinking. What do I mean by that? Because growth doesn't come from working harder, okay? It comes from building things that work even when you're not doing everything yourself, okay? So eventually you have to create something that works on its own, that where you don't have to be in it 24/7, okay? So here is the encouraging part. You don't need a title. You don't need the perfect role. You don't need ideal conditions. You can start practicing communication. You can start practicing emotional resilience, one small step at a time. So if you're wondering where to begin, here's something realistic, okay? So what I usually tell my students is you need to learn a useful skill, Okay, learn a useful skill. I'm sure everyone here, you're all professionals. You're all part of an industry, right? So you already have that skill, right? So learn a useful skill. Pay attention to problems. Okay, pay attention to the problems that you see people having. Okay, start small. Okay, you don't need to start with a huge. Remember that entrepreneurship is not always about inventing something new, it's about improving something. So start small. Okay, get feedback. Okay, if you are trying to sell a service, a product, okay, get that feedback from your clients. Be open mind. Okay, in order to improve, and then repeat again. So if you want to start today, I'll repeat again. You need to learn a useful skill. You already, I'm sure, have that skill. Pay attention to problems, start small, get feedback, improve, and repeat. Okay, so before we close, I want you to take a moment to think quietly. What is one small step you could realistically take in the next month? If you like, just type one word in the chat, a skill. What is that skill? What is that action or an area you want to explore? You don't need all the answers today. You just need one step. Okay, so yeah, so important. It's very important that we think, that we remember. Okay, the highlights the highlights of today is like, we don't need to think about great ideas, right? We need to think about problems and how to solve those problems. Okay, we need to be curious. Okay, we need to be curious on how we can solve those problems. Okay, we need to reframe the concept of failure. Okay, because failure isn't what it used to be before. Failure is about learning and keep going, right? And there, we need to think about these misconceptions about entrepreneurship, that entrepreneurship is all about freedom. No, it's about hard work. It's about consistency. It's about transparency. It's about trust. Okay, and it's not something that happens overnight. It's something that happens through consistency. Okay, and mostly consistency. So entrepreneurship today isn't about people who have figured out everything. No, it's usually, as I said, it's about being curious, about paying attention, about being willing to take responsibility when things are unclear. Okay, so in the world today, there's a lot of noise. Okay, we need people who are willing to build quietly. Okay, because we don't tell the world, hey, I want to start my own business. And no, we build quietly, and then we emerged with something that we think creates value. So creating value is also a key when it comes to entrepreneurship. There are so many things I could think of, and I could actually dive deeper into this topic. But this is the gist. And if you're willing to learn as you go, adapt when things don't work, and focus on creating real value, there's absolutely a lot of space for you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for your attention. I read some questions. How can one success? Okay. So the first question here is, how can we connect entrepreneurship with literature? What you mean is, what kind of books can you read about entrepreneurship? So Osterwilder Oscar Osterwald. Yes, that's his name. Let me type. Let me find it here so I can paste it. Alexander Osterwalder. Okay, he is the master. Okay, of entrepreneurship and how to create value. Okay, I typed it twice. Alex Osterwalder. His books are amazing. He created the Canva, how to create a business in a very easy way to follow. Okay, so I absolutely recommend that author. How can one success in their own business with entrepreneurship? Yes, Mr. Swanand.
Good evening, ma'am. Very important question is, when we started with our business or entrepreneurship, what are the indices, that by which we can identify whether my uh, business is growing, there is a expansion, there is a growth, or it is going down? Because many of the time it happens that the business is wide, so we cannot get the judgment. So what are the indices? That is my first question. And the second question is, nowadays there is a too much of competition in the business, so the competitors are there. And when there are competitors, that goes to the level of rivalry. And, even through the advertisements and the publicity also, they are blaming each other. How can we turn this business into positive entrepreneurship, rather than competing? I will make myself better, let that other person make themselves better, and let the consumer judge, what they want to have. We don't have that kind of healthy relationship nowadays. What is the reason behind this? Thank you.
Yeah, very good question. I'll answer the second question. So, yeah, you are right. Our competitors aren't local anymore; they are global, and we are competing. But you need to see: are we competing because of prices? Because then your target audience is different, right? Are we competing to get the best clients? Are we competing because we want to? You need to focus on your niche. Okay, what are the value that you want to create for your niche? Okay, for your clientele, for your audience. Okay, and in that way, you can upgrade your product. Your competitors can copy your product, of course, but the idea is that you know your clientele so well that you can that you can design your product or your services in a way that they choose you. So it takes a lot of study. It takes a lot of studying your audience in order to adjust your product or your service. Okay, and unfortunately, we are all competing, and that's something that we need to make peace with. Okay, the idea is for you. The advice that I give people, or entrepreneurs, is that even if you are competing, you still need to create value for your customers so they pick you. So be transparent, okay? Because now consumers are looking, right? Companies before were very distant. Now they want to know who's behind the product, who's behind the service. So it's very important that you come across transparent, that you come across trustworthy, and in that way, people will notice, and people will stand out. Yes, that's what I would say. It can seem very superficial, but it's about understanding your audience and creating value. Because if you don't understand your audience very well, your product will fit everyone. And if you want to be more exclusive, it depends on your product and your service. So I'll leave it like that.
Yeah, I remember the Coca-Cola, the international brand Coca-Cola, and after means maybe decades after, the Pepsi has been introduced. But there is they think there is a competition, but the Coca-Cola remains Coca-Cola because of their secret, the formulas, and Pepsi remains Pepsi only. So I think these are the examples. We should focus what you said correctly, that we should focus on our path only rather than looking at
Yeah.
others, because always we feel that the grass is green in others' land. So with this word, thank you very much for your great explanation, ma'am.
No,
Thank you. Thank you very much.
no, thank you very much. I am very happy to see all of you and to have had this talk. And I wish you a happy new year. Tomorrow is the end of the year, at least in the Western world. So, thank you so much for the invitation. Enjoy the rest of the evening, and I will enjoy the rest of my day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye bye.
Happy New Year. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Happy New Year, Christmas.
Happy New Year and Merry Christmas.
त्यांना नंबर तू दिला की बघतो आणि वेगळ्या नंबरला जायला नको. त्यांनी जे नंबर तो दिलाय बघतो तो आहे बघतो नाही तर दुसऱ्या नंबर जायला 8766 बरोबर आहे. 66 400 634.